This video is your ultimate guide to the trap almost every psychonaut falls into. You might even be in it now. We call it the psychedelic or spiritual ego.
This video was made purely for harm reduction and I do not promote the use of any drugs.
What is the spiritual ego and why does it exist? So you've lived your whole life in one state and maybe you drank or smoked some weed and felt fluctuations of that state. You're still very much grounded in this reality. Then you take this substance which shows you this whole other reality, and sometimes that reality feels even more real than this one. It can feel like waking up from a dream. This reality gives you so much information and profound knowledge and understanding that most people come out of it a changed person and a better person. But even though psychedelics dissolve your ego, it's still going to rebuild itself. And now that you've seen layers of reality most other people haven't, there's this sense of superiority that can get rebuilt with the ego. You can start to feel above others in the sense that you've gained this wisdom that they will just never understand until they have that experience. And because of that, you assume that you know better. Your ego doesn't go away after taking a psychedelic, and your goal shouldn't be to get rid of it. The ego is beneficial. Yes, it causes all the world's problems, but it's also responsible for all the beauty and amazingness and love in the world. Your goal shouldn't be to rid yourself of ego, and in fact, people who do this are often the people with the biggest egos. Your goal should be to befriend the ego and work with it to navigate the universe. That is why you were given one in the first place. Here are some of the common signs that you're trapped in a spiritual ego. You feel superior to others, you tend to look down on and judge others and demonize them. You forget to subscribe and you miss out on a whole bunch of awesome psychedelic related content. You kind of just assume you're right about everything and you don't really consider other people's perspectives. You think you're better than others because you can handle a higher psychedelic dose. And here's probably the biggest: you still see the world in a very black and white way and fail to see the grey in each. If you have a I'm right, you're wrong, full stop mentality, but you consider yourself spiritual, you're really the perfect embodiment of someone trapped in the spiritual ego. But trip tips: I am wiser because of my psychedelic experiences. These people who haven't had it yet are just trapped in the matrix, but I've woken up. I'm not saying you're not wiser or better off, but we have to be very careful about making assumptions. Every thought you have relies on a whole bunch of assumptions, and if just one of those is wrong, then your whole belief system crumbles. I've had hundreds of trips and been in and out of the spiritual ego multiple times, yet I'm not above anyone, rather everyone has their perspective. And some perspectives are more conscious than others, but that doesn't make them superior. Even what is conscious and what is unconscious is relative to a perspective. Every day I still have insights about myself and reality. A common mistake people with a spiritual ego make is that they assume they just already know. So, how do you escape the spiritual ego and why? Of course, you can define spiritual ego in loads of different ways, and in a sense, you can't really escape it, because if you're a living, breathing human with serotonin pumping through your brain, you're an ego. And if you identify as a spiritual person, or just as someone who's not always had serotonin pumping through your brain, then in one person's definition, you could very well be in a spiritual ego, and this isn't necessarily a bad thing. What we're talking about in this video is more of a limiting identity. What you need is open-mindedness. The goal with spirituality is not getting stuck into dogmatic perspectives. If you want to deeply inquire into spirituality, you need radical open-mindedness. What this means is, when you're debating someone, the goal is not to prove them wrong and to win the debate. The goal is to consider their perspective and learn and grow from it, and maybe share your perspective with the goal of helping someone to see something that they're missing. If you do this enough, you start to realize that what you think is true is actually very nuanced and malleable as you take on more and more perspectives. If someone fundamentally disagrees with you, a truly awakened person asks why and questions themselves. They inquire into and contemplate the opposing perspective, not just to make sure you're right and they're wrong, but to also find out why this person believes what they believe. What aspects of their beliefs are conscious and what aspects are unconscious? How could I learn from their beliefs, and how could I best share my perspective with this person in a way that maximizes growth for both of us? When you move away from the spiritual ego, you start to see others as yourself, and you recognize that all perspectives are valid in their own way. People are following their own path, and no path is better or worse than any other in any objective sense. You're not not superior because you've had that experience, you're just on a different path. Psychedelics just show you the path to walk, but you still have to walk it, and you can see how far you are along in that path by looking inwards and asking from an honest place. How much do I judge others? How often do I question myself? How easily do I dismiss views that conflict with my own? How are my survival interests holding me back? How is my attachment to comfort holding me back? Ironically, one of the best ways to get rid of spiritual ego is to keep walking your path and learning from your mistakes. Start meditating, read books, take more psychedelics, watch videos of people whose views conflict with your own, and genuinely question if they may be right. Talk to people, ask questions, and just try to live life consciously. Start to open yourself up to the possibility that everything you know could be wrong, and practice being okay with that. Remember that we all came from the same place, and practice accepting reality for what it is. Learn to love reality as it is without feeling the need to judge it and complain about it constantly. Learn to love yourself. If you've never tripped but you are planning to, then realize that this is something you will almost certainly face at some point, and try to remember that the spiritual ego isn't really about how wise you are in comparison to others, but how well you've embodied that wisdom. Your psychedelic experience may very well be beautiful and enlightening and epic, but now that you've shown yourself a better path to walk, are you going to be humble and walk it? Or are you going to look down on other paths as if they're inferior? Do you know what isn't inferior? Hitting that like button and the bell icon so you're notified when I next upload. You can also check out my Patreon, you know where. Thanks for watching everybody, I will see you all next week.